Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the GCSP today, both in person and virtually, to discuss this very important matter. At the GCSP, we believe in the role of cities, and we are committed to develop the role of cities. This is also why we have incubated the Geneva Cities Hub within our creative spark at its very early stages. We have facilitated its development into an association under the strong leadership of Mayor Sami Kanan and Camillo Camileva. So it is kind of a natural step that we join forces today and that we participate together in this important event on city diplomacy. You will all agree, I'm sure, on the significance of multilateralism for effective and sustainable cooperation. The choice of Geneva as a multilateral hub for Wednesday's summit meeting between the Presidents Biden and Putin, I guess, reconfirmed its importance. That said, I would like to say a few words on the role of cities within multilateralism. The growing role of cities in peace and security is obvious to all of us. You don't need to work for a city to understand its importance. As you will hear later this afternoon, research also very clearly confirms the city's rising relevance. 10 years ago, there was almost no reference to cities when speaking about peace and security. Real awareness of the growing role of cities is a relatively recent development. When I speak of the growing role of cities, I mean cities as political actors. They're no longer just places where incidents occur or locations to implement state policies, rights, and obligations deriving from international treaties. 68% of the world's population are projected to live in cities by 2050, according to the UN. Cities are therefore on the front line of a wide range of challenges and solutions related to urban security, to climate change, to development, and many other issues of the future. Cities are also dynamic and often, I should say, less bureaucratic than states. They have their own budget that they can use according to their own priorities. Priorities that have been shaped very close to the realities of the ground. Their political accountability is also very straightforward. If you have results, you stay. If you don't deliver, you're out. But despite of these advantages, the potential of cities as political actors has not been fully accomplished. Given the wide range of complex challenges we are confronting today, we need a wide range of actors seeking solutions. And within this landscape, the role of cities is absolutely key. So let us take today as an opportunity to address these issues and see where they take us. And in this sense, I wish you a very fruitful discussion and hand the floor back to you, Camilla.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Graminger. That was a very good start with some keywords you will hear today, like states being political actors, cities being political actors, cities having their own budgets, and cities being especially the voice, the closer voice of the populations for a wide range of issues. Turning to Lorenzo, who wrote this very prominent book published by Palgrave, Macmillan, and also doing many researches. Lorenzo is not only an academic person, but he's also someone who was very much on the field in local government structures, namely the city of Milan. And we know that Milano in Italy is one of the most active cities in international diplomacy. He is also working with the International Association of Francophone Mayors, Association des Maires Francophones, which is one of the most influent city-related networks in the world. So he did this research, he worked with the local governments, he worked with city networks, wrote a book. So Lorenzo, what is your take of the discussion today?
Thank you so much, Camilla. It is really a pleasure. I would like to thank you, Ambassador Greminger, for the hospitality, and thank you the Geneva Center for Security Policy and the Geneva Cities Hub for organizing this informal talk. This is how we can really feel city diplomacy living is the most exciting part of it, and it is exciting because, as has been mentioned, this is something which is evolving right now. So we are living the evolution all together, and we are trying to figure out what this means. Of course, that's basically the goal of my book. And I have to say, I've been working for quite a long time on city diplomacy, but I am still very much surprised of the phenomenal role that cities have been able to achieve on the international stage. The whole life of city diplomacy, modern city diplomacy, of course, it's just a little bit more than 1 century. But cities were from being a very lateral part of the international stage, being only, as Camilla was mentioning, something part of the internal affairs of states, to being very important actors of international relations. That we will see probably later today, actors that are able to implement activities even better than states. I hope I'm not disappointing any state representatives here. I have seen this as a sort of a trend which is motivated by the fact that many local leaders, mayors, as well as officers of international affairs of municipalities, to understand that international partnerships, both with cities, so city-to-city cooperation, but also with other new actors, such as NGOs, such as cooperation, as with the traditional actor of international relations, such as states and international organizations, are really powerful tools. Those partnerships are powerful tools to achieve through the international stage, basically local interest and universal values. So this is something that should be, it's somehow paradoxical, I can understand, could be seen as the opposites of the political spectrum, but actually city diplomacy bring them together. In the book, I try to analyze the 7 main dimensions where you can see those coming together of the local and international perspective, which are the development cooperation, the action for peace, and those two actually were the initial 2 dimensions of city diplomacy. But also something which is very, very important right now, such as the fight with climate change, the economic dimension, the economic development, which is for many cities the main driver of city diplomacy today. And this is something started in the 90s. Culture that is always omnipresent in city diplomacy, innovation, especially in the field of smart cities, and then migration with all the inclusion topics that are related to it. And I think that in all these different fields, we can see that the common point of the international action of cities is actually the essence itself of the city. So cities, as has been said, are the closest political institution to citizens, and at the same time, they are the #1 provider of public services. So those 2 dimensions really shape the way they act internationally. And on the political component, on the being the closest to citizens and local actors, you can see that city diplomacy has evolution to become a highly participatory approach, highly participatory practice. It's much more participatory when it's implemented fully than national diplomacy, because it's so much closer to the actors. it is possible, of course, to drive their will and their hopes into concrete action. And this fact that cities have to provide services gives a lot of concrete approach to the action of city diplomacy. Cities are problem solvers. And you can see that when you have those big meetings of mayors coming from across the world and coming from sometimes very different political spectrums, some of them conservative, other more progressive, different kind of approaches to the political world. But actually, there is a lot of collaboration with this pragmatic way of finding a solution to those big goals that cities share. So basically, this is why multilateralism among cities works. It's really pragmatic. I have to say, city diplomacy is not exempt of obstacles, just like other forms of diplomacy. And there are two. And the first one is of nature of the theory. So since this is relatively new, it is still need to study it and fully understand the place of cities on the international stage. And especially what Camilla was saying, try to understand how this can be connected to the other actors, starting from the state, starting from the international organizations. And in my book, I try to analyze how actually, even though you have some of the most visible moments of city diplomacy, when you have a friction between the national diplomacy and the city diplomacy, this has happened, for example, during the Trump presidency, about climate change, with the federal administration leaving the Paris Agreement, and a bipartisan group of cities, more than 230 cities from across the country, from across the nation, to join forces to respect this agreement that was an intergovernmental agreement, but they were measuring the capacity, of course, to respect it. No more needed now, but still, it's a moment of visibility. Despite this visibility, and there are many other examples, I strongly believe it is important to connect the different levels of government when this is possible. This is the job of the theory part of it, of course, as a practical component, but I think scholars are there also to help frame this and try to define what are the possible outcomes, the spillovers of a truly multi-level cooperation, which is something, after all, which is also really prone by the United Nations, since they've given a specific sustainable development goal number 17 on partnership for the goals. So this is for the theory part, the challenging part of the theory. And for the practical component of it, the challenges related to the practice of diplomacy is something that sometimes is a little bit forgotten, but city diplomacy is implemented still in a quite unequal way. So it's overwhelmingly practiced by big cities, especially in most higher income countries. And this is something which might strengthen the territorial divide within those countries, even within those countries. And we know that this territorial divide is generating some hunger. We have episodes such as the Gilets jaunes movement in France that stems from these different levels of benefiting from the openness, benefiting from the globalization. So there is an issue there. And my modest proposal is, in fact, to focus on the human resources. So even smaller cities from all over the world have a lot to benefit from, have a lot of resources they can go and catch on the international stage. Of course, this is only possible when the mayor has the political will, the political leadership goes for city diplomacy, and has this understanding, internal understanding of what are the resources, how to get them. This is really a modest contribution for cities to try to have a more complete vision. All in all, what I'm trying to do with this book is really to bridge those two different elements that have been going a little bit separate, the practice of cities and the research on international relations. It's important to connect them. I hope many other practitioners and scholars will try to go the other way, and this way try to understand a little bit more what's the full extent of this practice. If I can share something personal from my period at the municipality of Milan, I was there during the Expo of 2015, which was a very challenging situation with 145 participating countries. So to manage international relations were really a good challenge for a city which is not a capital like Milan. Of course, this was highly inspiring because we had the chance to see what is the role of political leadership. The mayor back then made international relations a priority and was able to help surpass the obstacles that might limit and hinder the full appliance of the city diplomacy. City diplomacy is new, so in municipalities, other sectors like education, such as services, mobility, might want to limit the importance, but the true city diplomacy is a transversal approach. It's a methodology, it's a meta system that allows the whole functioning of the city to work better. And so this is, of course, something that can be implemented when you have political leadership going for it. And the second point is the importance of engagement. Engagement really is the key for an effective city diplomacy. And engagement is built with communication, of course, public communication, explaining also in a pedagogical way what international relations are. We are no more in the time when a mayor can be inspired by values of solidarity, fraternity, and appreciation of other culture and just organize international activities for that reason. And international activity now is to be connected to the place, connected to the actor, to the population, and all together, the whole city can this way create and put the energies and hopes in this international action. I think I will stop here, but I really look forward to our discussion in the second part.
Thank you so much. You gave us obviously the desire to go further and to read your book. So this is done. Thank you, Lorenzo, and thank you for coming from Paris now that things start to open in Europe would be with us. Now turning to Mayor Mirik, and so grateful to have you with us. How do you see all this question of city diplomacy from your point of view? Where do you like to see yourself negotiating with state representatives? Which format, which topics, which outcome? And how to transmit good and challenging experience to others, experience you have had, how to receive experience of other mayors in the US, but also beyond the US. Too many questions, little time as usual, so.
Thank you very much for the really kind invitation and introduction. I do wish I could be there with you. Switzerland is my absolute favorite country to visit, and in ways that are personal, my deep love of chocolate, but also very political. It is a country seemingly made for mayors. I mean, the attention to detail, punctuality, and infrastructure investment is the dream of mayors all over the world. And this topic in particular, I was thrilled to see the invitation for, because my experience, even just in the last couple of years, being able to address the Paris Peace Forum in 2019, traveling to Brussels for the German Marshall Fund's Transatlantic Leaders Meeting, working with the World Economic Forum right there in Switzerland, meeting with the Mayors for Peace, led by the mayor of Hiroshima in Japan. Finding and building diplomacy across borders is a passion of mine in my 10 years in office. And I want to say, if I could, to build on Lorenzo's point, a fascinating and terrific book that I couldn't recommend more about what it is about cities that make them such an important and invaluable piece of international diplomacy. And I think it's three things. I really do. I think these three things are interconnected about cities. First is the effectiveness of city governments, right? The second is the romance, right? The sentimentality that we have around cities. And the third is mayors themselves, right? So the first thing is the effectiveness. And I think this is really, really important. And, especially when I work with I'm actually addressing the United Nations on our new Finger Lakes Climate Energy Compact. Don't tell anybody because that news is going to come out on Monday when we address the United Nations. And on Tuesday, I'm meeting with the mayor of Zurich, the mayor of Kingston, Jamaica, the mayor of Athens, Greece, and 3 or 4 others to discuss an end to the war on drugs and replacing the global war on drugs with a public health and safety approach. And in each of those cases, what you find when you're engaging with the United Nations is a lack of trust. It's true for Americans. They trust little the politicians at the national level chosen to represent them. They trust even less multilateral organizations. Who do they trust? They trust their local government. Why? It's because just yesterday, somebody stopped me on the street on the way to work and they said, there's a bag of garbage. So I'm walking to City Hall, you have to imagine, walking down the street. Someone says, there's a bag of garbage that's been sitting on that corner for 2 days. Can you have the crew come and pick it up? I'm thinking to myself, I'm annoyed, right? I've got stuff to do, I've got meetings, so I really have to. And I said, okay, fine, I'll have somebody do it. Then I stopped, thought, it'll just be faster if I do it myself. I walked over to the corner, grabbed the bag of garbage, brought it to my office where I disposed of it, right? That kind of high level, what does that do? What did I hope that would do? Well, I hope that guy who stopped me to complain, right, at 8:30 in the morning, why he was already so upset so early in the morning, I don't know. But who stopped me to complain is going to, the next time he walks past that corner, say, geez, I had a concern and it was addressed right away. What happens when you have a concern and it's addressed? Your level of trust increases, and your trust in government. If you cannot deliver for the people at the local level, they will not trust the state level. And if they don't trust the state level, they will not trust multilateral agreements. And that is a problem for all of us, because solving the problems of global conflict, and particularly global warming and climate change, will require the action of those multilateral organizations. So that's one reason why cities are particularly effective. And that goes to my second point, which is about mayors. I don't know if everybody knows this. Mayors are the most well-liked level of public servant in the world. Everybody know that? They are more popular on average than presidents, than governors, than senators. Do you know why we're more popular? It's because we're better looking. No, it's because that same level of trust, effectiveness, and closeness to the ground. The fact that we live in and among our community and are working in a constant feedback loop means that we are accountable in a way that makes people feel comfortable. And that comfort is necessary if we're going to make big structural changes, which leads me to my third point. Why is it important to take the effectiveness of mayors, the effectiveness of local governments, the trustworthiness of both, and tie them to cities, right? You think, okay, if your mayor is so great, why don't you just elect them president? By the way, you should be doing that. Elect mayors, presidents everywhere. But elect them president and then let them do the diplomacy. Let them do the negotiating. Well, there is a romance. And by this, I mean a sentimentality we have around cities. And it's for a very good reason, that the Kyoto Accords were not called the Japan Accords, right? That the Paris Accords were not called the French Accords, right? And that even people who I've spoken with and in my travels who might have a dim or small opinion of America get excited when I tell them I'm a New Yorker, right? America, I don't know. New York, yes, New York, from the movies. Times Square, Statue of Liberty, right? I'm from America, I don't know. I'm from Los Angeles. Hollywood, yes, Hollywood. We have an attachment to these places because I believe that there is something romantic and magical in the very DNA of our cities. why do people choose to live in, to understand that, you've got to understand, why do people choose to live in cities? Why do they come here? It's crowded, it's noisy, sometimes there's garbage on the corner, it's expensive. So why do we come to cities? We come with a deep sense of optimism. We come with hope, and we come because we're looking for something, right? Maybe we left the small town we grew up in, like I did, because we were looking to explore and experience the world. Maybe we're looking for partners, a husband or a wife, a spouse. Maybe we're looking for a career opportunity. Maybe we're looking for an education. Maybe we're looking for a place in which we can be gay, because back home in our small towns, we were not allowed to be. Maybe we're looking to change our hair and our style and our clothes to be somebody that we couldn't be before. And we go to cities seeking that opportunity because we're inherently hopeful and optimistic. That optimism is what's needed if we're going to succeed on the national and international scale. If we're going to break down the cultural barriers between us, it has been my experience that mayors working mayor to mayor, and that mayors who have the chance and opportunity to meet with heads of state, as I did actually with former President Ruth Dreyfus there in Switzerland, to discuss drug policy, are able to make breakthroughs that are not possible when traditional international diplomatic actors do the work. So my exhortation to the global community is to trust in your mayors in the same way that you trust them to pick up the trash, because mayors and cities get the job done.
So much, and I'm looking very much forward to have you here. Very, very inspiring quotes. I have the tendency now probably to give the floor for probably a couple of questions, because we have an amazing, panel here of researchers, ambassadors, diplomats, and people like this. So I will give the floor for just one or two burning questions. Then I will turn to the other panelists, probably Lorenzo and you, if we manage to be a little bit more flexible with the camera. And then I will turn back to Marie-Pierre and to Cecilia for the second part of the debate. So questions from the room to Lorenzo, to Mayor Mark Mirik at that point of time, or questions from the chat. I am receiving, I will do my best. Yes, Ambassador. So we have Ambassador of Gambia sitting with us. Please, Ambassador, you have the floor.
I can just speak?
Yes, please. You just speak. Yeah.
Wonderful. This is fascinating. I'm Professor Mohammed Ukadi, Ambassador of the Gambia here in Switzerland. Lorenzo, very fascinating insights that you have shared with us. And similarly, hi, Mayor. You are right. You are the most important connection to the work that we all do, which is our people. I'm wondering, both of you, how can cities harness the rising creativity of the youths and women to reinvigorate our cities further? Thank you.
Thank you. Achim Venman, who is, I'm not introducing everyone, but you're important and special, because just for everyone to know that the Geneva Cities Hub is quite a born in the head of this man. At least the name is really born in the head of Achim, who is professor here at the Graduate Institute and also running the peace building platform in Geneva. So sorry, that's the only exception I do to introduce somebody from the audience. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Camelia. And I'm also advising the director of the Graduate Institute on Strategic Development right now, which includes cities. And in this respect, my question to you, Mr. Mayor and Lorenzo, is if you could share something about the capability for diplomacy. Because diplomacy requires quite a lot of capabilities in terms of staff, in terms of analysis and knowledge. Those who are working for governments and foreign ministries know that it requires really institutional capabilities, yet officially you don't really have the mandate for that. You have interests. So how do you deal in the practical level with this dilemma of having real interest to be connected to other cities, in which you might be able to share a common problem or a common fate, and the inability very often to really create the institutional infrastructures necessary for effective representation and diplomacy?
All right, I want to turn back to first to Lorenzo, and in order to prepare my colleagues, so then I will turn back to the mayor. So yeah, we make it after Lorenzo. So go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for the question. I do believe that youth and women are essential elements of city diplomacy and, of course, the general management of a city. And I believe that cities are perfectly equipped, being the closest institution to citizens, to allow the different voices that constitute the inhabitants of the city to express and participate. So this is definitely something new also for cities, and a growing phenomenon, but it's a global phenomenon happening all across the world in cities small and big. And it's inspired of the theory of co-creation of public policies. So the idea is to basically have a trust relationship. The mayor was highlighting this level of trust. Once again, it's a global phenomenon of citizens towards the mayor, but the mayor himself or herself has to trust the citizens to be able to, first of all, identify what are the needs for the city. Sometimes it's just important to listen for the political leaders, and because people know what they need, and very often they have also the solutions. So this idea of trusting the people is resolved into the co-creation of policies with a logic of co-responsibility, which brings the things even further, because committee of association, local committees, schools, universities, formal and informal grouping of people can really be part of the project, including international projects, and bring the project to a birth, implement it, including going abroad to implement part of it if needed, and then share the results. Like in this way, the effect is even better than what the municipality alone could have done. Regarding the question from my colleague, well, definitely there is a gap. This is one of the weaknesses. Thank you for highlighting between the capabilities and the hopes that city diplomacy brings it. And this is also linked to the fact that there is this long list on the book. There is I think 2 pages of competences, the capabilities that the city diplomats needs to have, and you have basically all that the national diplomats need to be able to do in terms of understanding of different cultures, in terms of negotiation, in terms of understanding of international relations and political balances, international protocol, and so on. Plus, they need to know and to connect to those local energies and, of course, local infrastructure. I have to say, even though the institutional framing of city diplomacy changes from one place to the other, globally speaking, we can see that there is an expansion of this field, and more states support this, not as an alternative to their own national foreign policy, but actually as a sort of a complement, something that can bring an added value which is linked to this element of locality, of participation, that is particularly strong, in particular in public diplomacy. So I see that many ministries of foreign affairs, or in some states you have a specific ministry for cities, they support this, they provide coordination, they try to achieve those shared goals all together. It's something that is being built as we speak, but it is bringing very encouraging first results.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lorenzo. Are we ready to turn to Mayor Mirik, please?
Yeah, great questions. Young people and women, getting them more involved is really, really important. So you probably can't tell it by looking at me, but when I was elected, I was the youngest mayor in New York State history. I was the second youngest mayor in American history. I was just 24 years old. And in fact, I ran last year into the mayor of Nashville, Tennessee, who when I told him, I said, oh, I'm the mayor of Ithaca. He said, oh yeah, Ithaca. Ithaca used to have a young mayor. What happened to him? Did you beat him or did he leave town? And I was like, it's very rude. This is what happened to him. So I'm a firm believer in the energy and the creativity and the moral authority that young people can bring to government. And I find that in all of the rooms in which I operate, when there is a gender balance, right? When there are as many or more women than men, the teams work better, smoother. Turns out women are better communicators on average. They are better problem solvers, and they are more cooperative in their nature. So we have to encourage both. Encouraging both is both simple and difficult. It's simple in that I believe people go where they're invited, right? When they are invited to go someplace, they go there. If we tell our young people, I want you to run for office, and I'm going to show you how to do it, they will go. But this is where it gets difficult. The invitation has to be sincere. This is why they're called political parties, right? You can't show up to a party unless you're invited. If you show up to a party you haven't been invited to, things get awkward. But showing up to a place you've been invited means that there is a spot reserved for you, that there is a seat at the table, that there is food that's ready for you to share. And so often we miss that part. We say, sure, we want young people. Sure, we want women involved. But when they come, we crowd them out physically, verbally. We dismiss their inputs, and we seek to hold on to our own power and our own sense of what's right. I think if we're actually going to diversify our political leadership, we've got to both invite folks in and then trust their leadership, even if it means ourselves taking a step backwards or a step down. So simple and straightforward, but difficult to do. And then the question on resources and capabilities. That's exactly right. And that's why I believe that we would be better off if our nations, if our states, tapped mayors, tapped cities, gave them the resources they need, and then similarly trusted them to engage in high-level diplomacy across borders. That would give, I'm of the firm belief that mayors have too much responsibility and too little power, and that the federal government has too much power and too little responsibility. And if we can even that out by giving some of the power of the federal government, particularly some of the resources of the federal government, to mayors and localities and asking them to be responsible for international diplomacy, we'll be better off. But I will just say, the technical glitches aside this afternoon, this is one of the examples of what's possible now that wasn't even thinkable 5 years ago, much less 50 years ago, which is that having a real-time quasi in-person exchange of ideas across borders with nothing more than a laptop is a tremendous opportunity to break down differences and to make possible what was before would have required thousands of hours of planning, days and days of travel, and quite a bit of jet lag.
Thank you so for these words, and I fully agree with you. Let's see whether Marie-Pierre, sitting here on my right side, and she's here with the French mission. She's here near me in her very much personal capacity. So, donc, Marie-Pierre, je me tourne à vous.
Merci. D'abord, merci Camélia et merci au Geneva City Hub de m'avoir invité à contribuer à cette conversation. Même si je suis là à titre personnel, je pense que je vais essayer de dire des choses qui ne feraient pas sauter au plafond mon ambassadeur, par exemple. Et peut-être que le français est la langue de la diplomatie, mais en tout cas, je vais le citer. En tout état de cause, pour lui et pour nous, Genève, c'est le lieu du multilatéralisme où on parle français. Donc, utilisons aussi la diversité de nos langues. Du point de vue de l'État, comment ça se présente? C'est un petit peu ça ma question et mon rôle ici. Et comment est-ce que les États nationaux voient d'un bon ou d'un mauvais œil le fait que les villes se mêlent de diplomatie? Poser la question, c'est déjà voir qu'il y a une relation de méfiance, de conflit ou un minimum de dialectique qui fait que c'est pas si évident que ça. Et c'est vrai, et que c'est une relation profondément politique. Et c'est vrai que si on prend le global, ça a été dit, mais je vais le dire un peu autrement pour changer d'angle. D'un point de vue politique et historique, les États ont le droit international pour eux. Je vous rappelle que le traité de Westphalie, qui date de 1648, nous dit que la diplomatie et les relations internationales sont des affaires entre États. Pardon, je vais trop vite.
Do you hear the translation, Maya Mirik? Do you hear it? The translation? Yeah, okay, good.
Donc, les États ont le droit international pour eux. Voilà. Après, on a mis un peu les organisations internationales et les Nations Unies, mais on restait quand même entre États. De l'autre côté, les villes, elles ont l'histoire pour elles, en particulier sur le continent européen. Les villes ont l'antériorité. Elles ont été des institutions publiques avant les États et elles ont elles-mêmes entretenu bien avant les États les cités grecques ou Venise ou la Ligue hanséatique ou que sais-je encore, des relations internationales pour elles. Donc, elles ont l'histoire. Et donc, il y a quand même cette balance de deux entités politiques. On a vu, ça a été dit, je le dirais aussi un peu différemment, une évolution des relations internationales, disons, dans le dernier quart du XXe siècle, parce que pour intégrer des nouveaux défis mondiaux, au-delà de la paix et la guerre entre les nations, en particulier les défis, disons, environnementaux, planétaires, climatiques, etc., qui se sont finalement superposés aux défis traditionnels de paix et de sécurité et mélangés, etc. Puis tout récemment aussi les défis migratoires, qui sont aussi une nouvelle salve de défis qui ne se présentent pas tout à fait de la même manière, d'une certaine manière, et qui a vu monter le rôle, comme vous le savez, des acteurs non étatiques. Et en particulier des villes, mais pas seulement. Juste un exemple, parce que j'ai été engagée depuis longtemps dans ces négociations-là, mais 92, les conventions de Rio, et donc le lancement de la Convention 4 pour le climat, entre 1992 et 2002, Johannesburg, la place dans la salle, dans l'espace, des acteurs non étatiques était multipliée par 2. Donc, on voit bien cette évolution. Et dans cette évolution, revenons aux villes, la ville n'est pas un acteur étatique comme les autres, non étatique comme les autres. Et ça, c'est quelque chose qui monte et qui n'était pas évident au début. Et que on a considéré qu'on allait mettre la ville avec tous les autres acteurs non étatiques, en particulier avec les ONG, parce que tout ça, c'était du local, de la population, etc. Mais en vrai, c'est faux. Parce que la ville, la cité est la plus vieille institution politique du monde. Je reviens à l'histoire. Et en fait, la ville, la cité, c'est le seul gouvernement local qui soit omniprésent dans le monde entier. Le maire est le seul pouvoir élu qui soit omniprésent dans le monde entier, quels que soient les gouvernements et les modes de gouvernement. Bien sûr, entre démocratique et autoritaire, les relations sont différentes. Bien sûr qu'il y a, même dans les démocraties, des infinités de systèmes du plus décentralisé au plus jacobin qui font que c'est différent. Toujours est-il que partout, il y a des maires. Et je pense que là, on a quelque chose à articuler qui est proprement politique dans la négociation et la diplomatie internationale. Plus le fait que le poids des villes est de plus en plus important et que, comme on l'a rappelé, actuellement, on a 55% de la population mondiale qui vit dans les villes et on s'attend à ce que ce soit plus important. Donc voilà, je pense qu'en introduction, je dirais qu'on est vraiment dans l'angle du politique et des relations très politiques. Alors, pourquoi on parle de défis? Parce que, évidemment, ça peut se construire en complémentarité ou en opposition de pouvoir politique au niveau mondial. Alors, juste pour rappeler aussi, parce qu'on a tendance à opposer, que finalement, la diplomatie au sens large, que ce soit les défis des villes ou ceux des États, sont finalement pas très différents. Puisqu'en fait, il s'agit d'arriver à concilier des actions pour des objectifs universels de valeurs ou de biens communs, exemple la démocratie, exemple lutter contre le changement climatique, etc., qu'on doit arriver à conjuguer à des intérêts locaux de la ville, urbains ou nationaux. Pour la ville, ça serait renforcer l'attractivité d'une ville au niveau mondial ou améliorer la qualité de vie urbaine pour tous les citoyens d'une ville donnée. Pour un État, je ne vous fais pas de dessin, enfin, voilà. Donc, finalement, on est à des échelles différentes, mais à des problématiques qui, finalement, ne sont pas si différentes que ça. Et bien sûr, avec des outils différents, puisque, évidemment, les États ont le droit pour eux. Alors, la question de base, en fait, en prenant dans l'autre sens, c'est d'abord, qu'est-ce qui se passe quand les valeurs, les enjeux, les intérêts communs universels sont divergents entre les villes et leur État-nation. Et exemple, les enjeux de démocratie. Exemple plus concret, l'action climatique. On a parlé effectivement des villes américaines sous l'époque Trump, on en a déjà, c'est vrai. Il y a aussi le jeu sur la convergence, comme, puisque je suis française, je vais prendre l'exemple français, mais je pense que l'accord de Paris et la COP21 a été un exemple majeur de convergence pensée entre les intérêts de la ville haute, Paris, qui a traîné les 1000 villes derrière, les intérêts de la France et de la diplomatie française pour aboutir à l'accord de Paris, et même les intérêts de l'Union européenne, puisque moi qui étais dans la salle, le commissaire européen climatique a dit aujourd'hui, je remercie la France et je suis fière d'être européen. Donc on voit bien comment, dans ces cercles concentriques, quand c'est convergent, ça peut avoir un grand intérêt, et quand c'est divergent, on a une force d'opposition. Et quand c'est convergent, c'est pour ça que l'aspect opposé ville-État, quel est l'intérêt des États nationaux? Eh bien, c'est aussi d'avoir dans ces villes qui dépendent de lui, dans ces villes nationales, une sorte de soft power dans la diplomatie mondiale qui permet de relayer les enjeux nationaux au niveau mondial. Et ça, c'est très vrai dans la diplomatie des États, dans un certain nombre de sujets qui sont de plus en plus importants. Alors, très anciennement pour la culture. Je prends un seul exemple qui est l'association des maires francophones, qui à la fois dans la culture, dans la langue et dans la diplomatie, fait des ponts entre les différentes francophonies du monde entier. Pour le climat, je viens d'en parler, ça c'est clair, et où on est beaucoup plus dans un sujet de conflictualité sur le débat sur les migrations tel qu'il est aujourd'hui sur la table. Donc on voit bien comment on est entre deux dans l'action concrète. Et là, le défi aussi, et je pense pour toute l'action internationale, c'est comment éviter de s'enferrer dans un débat qui existe aujourd'hui, qui est ce sont les villes les vrais acteurs, notamment de l'agenda 2030, de l'action climatique, du pacte mondial sur les migrations. Et ça permet d'avoir des actions sur le terrain parce que tous ces États bureaucratiques, voire ces Nations unies bureaucratiques, ne permettent pas d'avancer. Et je pense, je dis ça avec des mots un peu provocants, que c'est un des vrais enjeux. C'est-à-dire de ne pas jouer cette opposition qui est souvent jouée par les Nations unies de temps en temps, hein, comme quoi tout se passe dans les villes, donc on va y arriver comme ça, et il s'agit juste de lutter contre les États bureaucratiques. C'est peut-être l'articulation qui est la solution. Et ça, c'est un vrai enjeu, parce que c'est vrai que l'action des villes, et notamment dans le multilatéralisme, permet d'ancrer dans le concret les nouveaux agendas du multilatéralisme, et ça, notamment dans l'action climatique, mais aussi dans tout ce qui est agenda urbain, UN Habitat, le nouvel agenda urbain, etc. Voilà. Et je pense que dans cette problématique-là, la crise de la Covid-19 et l'action des villes qui étaient confrontées à des choses extrêmement concrètes et urbaines dans cette fermeture complète des frontières, etc., et de confinement généralisé où on ne pouvait plus sortir de chez soi, a mis en valeur les enjeux de la vie urbaine et la capacité quand même des maires à répondre immédiatement aux problèmes posés par la gestion de l'épidémie, parfois en dépit des États, parfois en appui aux États, mais en tout cas au plus proche du citoyen et pour faire passer les messages. Alors, dans cette… donc, du coup, la place des villes dans la gouvernance mondiale se pose dans ces termes-là. Et ce qu'il faut pas, et dans leur immense diversité, parce que les villes qui essayent d'agir, effectivement, voilà, et ont une grande différence, comme je l'ai dit au début, en termes de pouvoir agir, y compris dans les démocraties, entre des États qu'on va qualifier de jacobins à la française, même s'ils commencent à se décentraliser, et même si le mouvement général va vers une décentralisation, ou des États déjà plus décentralisés avec des pouvoirs plus étendus pour les villes, je pense à l'Italie qui est un pays de ville par exemple, il y a des grandes différences dans les outils effectifs d'action. Et il y a aussi une deuxième grande différence, et je parlais, c'est si tout le monde veut être efficace, il y a des grandes différences entre États, entre la bonne articulation entre les stratégies des villes et les stratégies nationales. C'est très vrai en matière de changement climatique, on pourrait avoir plein d'exemples. Comment, dans les stratégies nationales d'adaptation au changement climatique, par exemple, les villes s'articulent-elles? C'est pas forcément évident. Et comment les villes peuvent-elles agir tout ensemble pour s'intégrer dans les stratégies internationales, tout en étant liées à leur stratégie nationale. Et ça, c'est aussi assez compliqué. Juste un exemple pour vous faire comprendre, le Global Covenant of Mayors, qui a été institué à la suite de la COP21, pousse actuellement entre maires justement ce qui pourrait faire penser cette complémentarité, c'est-à-dire une association de gouvernements locaux et particulièrement de villes pour que soit intégrée dans les contributions nationales des États la part des villes pour être conforme à l'accord de Paris. Et donc là, on arrive à une complémentarité qui est absolue, c'est-à-dire il y a les États qui vont contribuer et puis les villes qui pourraient contribuer en complément de la contribution nationale. C'est des choses peut-être à réfléchir. Donc, au-delà de toutes ces différences, se pose aujourd'hui effectivement, pour les États comme pour tout le monde, la place des villes dans une gouvernance mondiale, en particulier, je pense, du point de vue du multilatéralisme, et comment est-ce qu'elle pourrait avoir, comme on dit familièrement, un siège à la table des Nations Unies en tant que ville et en tant que pouvoir urbain. Ce serait où? Ce serait pour quoi faire? Ce serait pour les questions urbaines? Et la question est ouverte. Hein. Je pense qu'il y a un certain nombre de défis majeurs sur cette question qui va avancer et qui se pose à nous tous. Parce que les villes sont de facto déjà aujourd'hui un acteur majeur, mais qu'on n'arrive pas à articuler. D'abord, c'est comment elles vont s'articuler avec leurs États-nations, comme je viens de le dire. Ensuite, comment est-ce qu'on va éviter une compétition généralisée et mondiale entre villes qui ferait du dumping social, environnemental, etc., voilà, au lieu de faire de la coopération, ce qui est un vrai risque. Et puis, ensuite, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire des autres? Et ça, c'est des défis majeurs pour les États, c'est-à-dire, à côté des villes, comment on traite le monde rural. Et je pense qu'en France, notre effet gilet jaune est quand même beaucoup lié à ça. Et aussi, au-delà du monde rural, et ce que disait Lorenzo, aussi, les villes qu'on voit agir, c'est les grandes villes, c'est les métropoles, ce sont les capitales, ce sont celles qui ont beaucoup de… Et qu'est-ce qu'on fait de toutes les autres villes? Et comment on va traiter et rendre acteur ce réseau de toutes les villes moyennes, petites, qui structurent l'urbanité, en particulier en Europe, Je dirais qu'en France, c'est un problème majeur, tant la place de la ville capitale est importante par rapport à toutes les villes moyennes. C'est moins un problème dans d'autres pays où les villes sont mieux réparties, mais c'est quand même un problème majeur, qui est aussi dans notre effet gilet jaune d'ailleurs. Et c'est pour ça que j'aime beaucoup le projet du Forum des maires. Si on réfléchit au Forum des maires, sur le territoire, sur le continent européen, commençons petit, qui est le plus urbanisé du monde, comment est-ce qu'on arrive à avoir, j'ai juste 2 minutes, à avoir toutes ces villes de 20-30 000 habitants qui peuvent coopérer ensemble. Juste une conclusion en termes peut-être optimistes, ou en tout cas d'avenir. Je crois qu'un des enjeux majeurs de la coopération aussi, c'est comment les villes comme les États peuvent faire atterrir leurs citoyens en tant que pouvoir politique majeur à leur action diplomatique internationale. Et dans un monde aujourd'hui bousculé par le Covid, où on a des replis nationalistes, où les valeurs démocratiques restent à défendre, où l'étranger peut être une menace, je pense que l'adhésion et la participation de tous les citoyens à une action internationale cosmopolite, prenons un mot pour conclure, qui redonne de la curiosité de l'autre, de l'ouverture, etc., pour construire des choses en commun. Je pense que là, on a des enjeux aussi très politiques qui peuvent être très bien articulés. Voilà, je n'ai pas été trop long.
C'était très simple, très clair et pas du tout très long. Merci beaucoup.
Voilà, merci de m'avoir écouté.
Je vais parler maintenant en anglais. So I'm switching to English right now. Thank you so much. We are heading to the last speaker. You're a professor, you're a doctor, and you're running a master on international negotiation and policy making at the Graduate Institute in Geneva. The floor is yours. We will be probably 3-4 minutes late because I will give a last word to all the speakers, and quick questions you can send me on the chat, or I will give you the floor for quick questions. Cecilia, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Camelia. Thank you, Lorenzo, for sharing your book, and all the panelists. I've learned a lot sitting on this panel today. So what I would like to focus on, in terms of when we want to actually look at capacity building, I want to look at 2 different things. First of all, understanding the incentives and the opportunities for engagement at the international level. And that's very much what Camelia asked me to focus on, engagement of city and local actors at the international level, in international negotiations, international policy processes. So we want to first look at the incentives and the opportunities for actually engaging. And then second, we can actually turn to the practicalities of what skills and tools do we need to equip city and local actors with in order to engage and try to bolster some of the capacities in view of the fact that there are limited resources, etc. And that's really what we've been talking about with the Geneva Cities Hub with respect to the executive master that I'm involved in. So when we look, first of all, at what are the incentives for engagement, we've heard a lot from Lorenzo, and he talks a lot about in the book, as well as from the other panelists, a lot of the incentives for city actors and local actors to engage in city diplomacy and international diplomacy. But I'd like to also open it up beyond the things that have been spoken about, political outcomes, looking at economic and social outcomes, looking at cultural outcomes, technical outcomes. We also need to see the role that cities are playing in terms of the policy and programs that they're implementing as part of the concerted effort to really tackle a lot of the global challenges that we're facing. And then beyond that, I think where we really need to create incentives are for a lot of the actors here in Geneva, in other international, in hubs of international negotiation and policy making. And so what are the incentives? When you look at international policy processes from start to finish, from first identifying global challenges and new issues, to putting them on the policy agenda at the international level, to moving over then to the negotiation of agreements and actual development of policies and programs to address those issues, through to implementation, through to monitoring, evaluation and review processes to look at how effective implementation is. If you look across that policy process, as Lorenzo mentioned, other panelists have mentioned, the opportunities for engagement and the incentives for engagement go far beyond that stage of implementation of international agreements. And it's far beyond, the national governments potentially implementing policies and laws in some cases to actually implement those agreements. So if we look first at that first step of identifying new issues to go onto the actual policy agenda, as we've heard, cities and local governance actors, they're closest to the effects of global challenges. They're closest to citizens. They're closest to the space where the challenges are actually having their effects. And they therefore are uniquely placed in terms of the expertise that they have, the understanding of the nature of global challenges, of where they're actually being rolled out, to be able to feed in and raise the flag when they're first happening in real time, so that we don't have to wait 20 years down the track for issues to actually become the scale of global catastrophe in order to address them, that we're really seeing with a lot of the global challenges we're facing today, whether it's climate change, migration, etc., migration management. At the next phase, once you've got these issues on the international agenda, the negotiation of international agreements and the designing of policies and programs at the international level, international actors can really learn from the wealth of experience of cities, including many tried and tested policies, because these actors are the ones who have been managing transnational issues for centuries. In fact, even if we didn't call them global challenges or international issues, at that time, they were transnational issues because they were faced across borders, they were faced in multiple cities, etc. And to give you an example of how that, we're starting to see this happen at the international level, but we can further it. There was a one-year preparatory process before the negotiations began on the Global Compact for Migration. Both took place both here in Geneva as well as in New York, bringing together stakeholders, including cities and local actors, but all different types of stakeholders, non-governmental organizations, etc. And there was this full one-year preparatory process that was about dialogue, and it was about the real discussion, not just reading off typical solutions, etc., but really getting to the crux of the issues and sharing of best practices. And what the cities and local governance actors were able to offer in that forum really then was able to feed into the understanding of the issues among member states, who then were tasked with negotiating the Global Compact for Migration. And a very simple example is, it was discussed, some cities are implementing firewalls between government departments in terms of service provision for undocumented migrants. And so this was brought up as an effective tool used by some cities that then was just brought up during negotiations, etc. So bringing them in at that stage, but also making the space at the international level to ensure that there is that space for dialogue, debate, constructive debates, which means a lot of disagreements, but really getting to the innovation that can come out of that then before negotiations and before the design of policy solutions is actually taking place. In terms of the role that that cities can play in implementation, that's more well understood. I won't go into a lot of details, but at the city level is where much of the change and the behaviour change is actually going to take place. So it makes sense then to actually involve the actors who are going to be implementing the solutions eventually down, once it trickles down to that level, in the actual policy design phase, again, so that you can benefit from the expertise that is actually from their years, centuries of managing and implementing programs on these issues. And there was an evaluation that was done on the process that led to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that really asked the question, and that had a very long consultative process before the Agenda 2030 was adopted and the Sustainable Development Goals were actually put forward and agreed upon by member states of the United Nations. And that really long consultative processes also included cities and local governance actors. There was local authorities, they were one of the 12 major groups engaged in this process for consultation. And an evaluation of the, not just cities and local governance actors, but all of the engagements with different stakeholders. It really showed the big difference between developing the Sustainable Development Goals and the Millennium Development Goals is if you include these stakeholders in the actual preparatory negotiation design phase of international agreements, then you end up with a lot more ownership with respect to the actors that need to come on board to actually implement the international agreements. So it meant after they were adopted, 2015, all of those stakeholders involved, even if they didn't actually influence the outcome or their preferences weren't included, they were ready to hit the ground running because they had the awareness and they had a sense of ownership of this international agreement, having been involved in the process. And then looking finally at monitoring, evaluation and review processes, we're seeing a lot of engagement now around the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and there's a lot of space for improvement for other international agreements and building awareness among city and local actors themselves of how you can engage in these processes at the international level, whether it's through the big forums like the Universal Periodic Review with human rights, the high-level political forum on sustainable development, or much smaller review processes. We see the treaty bodies, the human rights treaty bodies, reviewed, countries come under review in very small intimate settings, but often there is a formal opportunity to actually input into those processes and to raise issues from the city and local level as well. So finally, just to touch on, practically speaking, how we can actually bolster the capacities of cities and local governance actors, as well as create the spaces that you were mentioning as well, creating the spaces that we need in order to really engage and build the trust that we're hearing from the Mayor of Ithaca as well, that is required. So here, first of all, it's about building knowledge and understanding of international policy processes among city and local governance actors. Understanding that for every issue and global challenge, there is a different governance forum or forums. So you can choose and the forum shopping of where do I go about this issue if I want to engage. So finding out what those are, understanding that it's different across issues. For migration, you're going to have a completely set up of governance forums and frameworks, actors, mix of actors, etc. So building that understanding. Understanding the formal opportunities as well as the informal opportunities across all of these issues for actually engaging, which again is varied issue by issue. We know human rights and sustainable development has very high engagement, formal engagement. Other issues, security, finance, trade, much less. It's opening up for all issues, but much less opportunities for formal engagement. When the formal engagement isn't possible, then what informal opportunities do we have for cities and local actors to actually engage in these processes? And then as well, understanding the target audience. If you're engaging in, it comes back to communications and the role of communications, etc., in these processes, of effectively engaging in diplomacy at any level. Identifying who the actors are in these settings is vital, but it's often unknown if you're not engaged, living in international Geneva or New York or other cities that are hubs for international negotiation. Looking at and understanding the benefits of forming coalitions, which we're seeing a real proliferation of networks, etc., and coalitions among cities and local actors, but really understanding why that is important if you're an individual city and local governance actor and how you can actually do that. Negotiation skills, many other things that Lorenzo mentioned in his book, the use of data and evidence to bolster your positions and using data visualizations, etc. These are all skills that can be learned. Use of testimonials and case studies, which are we can really draw on from cities and local actors because that's where it's happening. That really are needed, and research shows that is often what builds the motivation to actually create change and the motivation for change. Simple things like learning how to write a policy brief and tailoring it for international policy processes, which is very different compared to when you're looking at the national level. As well as preparing a really short statement if you have that 2 or 3 minute opportunity to speak in a week-long session with thousands of others who are speaking. How do you actually, what are you trying to do there? So understanding these sorts of the skills and getting those. As well as writing reports for monitoring and evaluation and review processes. And learning how to engage in partnerships, different models of collaboration, looking at different tools such as web platforms, mobile applications where international organizations, city actors themselves can share best practice, etc. So to wrap up, just to really look at, from the governments and international organizations perspective, to really clarify and think through what the role that city and local governance actors can play. I was very surprised. I've studied for many years the role of non-state actors, non-governmental organizations engaging in international policy processes. And when first observing some of these big meetings or negotiation sessions, I was really struck by the fact that cities and local governance actors, as well as parliamentarians, would sit with the other non-governmental organizations and speak and make their statements as NGOs or non-state actors. And so really to think through, is that the right place for these governmental actors, albeit at different levels, to actually be engaging? Or is there the potential for other spaces to be created? And then governments as well can put delegates, have as part of their delegations, city representatives, so that they can benefit from that experience in the actual negotiations and adoption, etc. So they can build that space into their delegations, either through consultations or actually bringing in a representative on their delegation. So I will leave it there, but thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you very much. So the discussion will be really quick because we are obviously running out of time, but this is again another issue. We are running out of time for purpose, so we can reconvene on a second talk, because this is by far not the last time we're discussing city diplomacy, just the beginning a series of discussion. So very quick, like flash interventions of the very rich thing we have heard here. Please go ahead, and then I have something from the chat. And the final, very short word from the panelists the moment I finished. So flash interventions from, yes, please.
Very quick. Thank you very much for this last intervention. What I didn't hear much is the increasing emergence of digital technologies and smartening of cities. And I'm wondering what your insights is, and connected to the lack thereof of adequate capacities and competences in our local offices and mayoral offices, which is key to build up this infrastructure. So you have this challenge of lack of, especially when you speak from cities in Africa or cities in the South, and the pressure that they have, and the need of these emerging technologies, and its implications as well to those that these mayoral offices do serve in our cities. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the presentations. Actually, you enumerated such a panoply of possibilities for cities to. My question or my challenge to you would be to ask, on one hand, we heard that cities are very effective because they are closest to the citizens. On the other hand, we know that multilateralism and international Geneva exists because we understood that global challenges can be only answered at multilateral level. If you would be an advisor to a city, what would be the most important part you would advise to do? Where to join in? Because if they want to join in all the options you presented, the cities would need an army to cover all the issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this. And I just a last comment to pay tribute to those who are following us on chat. So there was a very strict comment saying that cities are not subject of the international public law, and that's it, and states are subject of the international public law. We will not be probably able to develop this today, not only to develop the things about smart cities, but this actually gives us the feat already to announce before the end of the year another city diplomacy talk on the topic of cities and the international public law, and another talk probably beginning of next year of this digital and smart cities diplomacy, if we can tell it. So to tie to the other questions and final word, just to structure the glitches here, I'm sorry again for this. Mayor Svanten Miri for the last probably comments, and then when you finish, I'll turn back quickly to the panelists and we finish there.
Well, thank you. And very briefly, I'll just point that the tremendous opportunity, if we can bridge the digital divide to bridge our actual divides, and to lean on what is best about mayors, that at the state and federal level, you find that there are conservatives and there are progressives, but there's a third political party, which is mayors. We are tasked only with getting the job done. And we do not see mayors in other nations as our rivals, in the same way that heads of state may see those other nations as rivals. So playing on all of those opportunities to bring our citizens together by bringing our cities together, leaning into what is romantic and sentimental about cities, and playing on the fact that mayors are the most popular and effective form of governance, pushing them out front to negotiate, sign, and then promote, very importantly, promote multilateral agreements should be the future of our diplomacy. And I thank you for this forum, and thank you very much for the book. It was a tremendous read that I recommend to everybody.
Thank you very much for these final words. Thank you for recommending the book. I'll give the word to Lorenzo to thank you also. And I will have the pleasure to see you on Tuesday, because I'm moderating the other debate you mentioned with former President Dreyfus, and by definitely third time in April 2022 in Geneva, I strongly hope. With this, I'm turning quickly to Marie-Pierre, if you can do it in English now, just for the sake of not switching. 1 minute or so, then Cecilia and Lorenzo, the final word, so we close it. Marie-Pierre, go ahead.
1 minute. I will try to answer your question of if I was an advisor of a city changing my mind. I think my first answer will be this has to be decided with the citizen. As I said, I think perhaps city and cosmopolitanism are the best way to go in international place, in link with the state and so on, to go back. And I think discuss with the citizen, and probably in the big challenges like climate change topics, something like that. Can I say another word or
yes,
not?
please,
because I answer the question.
Yes.
Another word, I think the real thing, and that is fact. Yes, cities are not subject to international law, and they are not producing international law. And as I said, they are the older political institutions. So I think that is a very political question we have to discuss in international matter, and to go to the right place for everybody, and having the citizen with us again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Cecilia,
Thank you.
1 minute.
1 minute. Thank you for your questions. Very quickly on the digital divide, I read recently a fascinating report from UN Development Programme assessing the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on inequality. And the takeaway that I took from that report was really very much that if we can fix the digital divide, we're going to reduce inequalities in so many other areas. So whether it's access to education, whether it's the ability to work remotely, etc. during this, but attending international meetings and participating in the international negotiation and policy frameworks it can be really facilitated for people from the Global South. If we can fix that for delegations from the Global South and experts and stakeholders in particular, if we can fix that digital divide, as well as visa access to countries where international negotiations and policy making is made increasingly difficult for people from the Global South, the cost of travel, etc. So there are many other things along with that digital divide. In terms of advice, I would really say to clarify your objectives. What is it that you want to achieve or are trying to achieve? Based on that objective, see what aspect of that policy process is most suitable. Is it about flagging a new issue? Then go straight to that issue, agenda setting phase. And there are different conference forums, the General Assembly, discussions that take place in September, October to raise new issues or resolutions, etc. Or if it's more the negotiation, designing of the policies, etc. That phase. So I clarify the objectives.
Thank you so much. That was 1 minute. Lorenzo.
Thank you, Camelia. I would like to thank all the panelists and the public for this very enriching exchange. I would like to say maybe what I will take home is a strengthened belief in the importance of sharing. What we have done today basically is sharing knowledge, sharing in a creative way, and we are representative of different levels of action, of the way the society is structured. We have states, we have cities, we have university, NGOs, and there is learning and sharing from one another, which is really becoming this engine of coping together, addressing together those big challenges. And I see that cities are ready and willing to play this role they correctly, I believe, think they deserve. This is something very creative, I guess, where cities are and other actors are exploring new way, as Marie-Pierre was saying, of being cosmopolitan, of connecting the local to the global, and finding out new solutions that were not seen before, but they can definitely reach all of us. And I would like to quote a mayor from my home country, Mayor Leoluca Orlando, mayor of Palermo, and when he was asked how many migrants there are in Palermo, and we all know that Italy is one of the entry points for migration in Europe, he said none, because in Palermo we only have Palermitans.
Wow. So that was really inspiring. Another talk about migration and mayors. Just
That would be very
definitely.
interesting.
I wish to thank everyone, audience in the room, audience on Zoom, those who will watch after, those who will continue to follow us, those who will buy the book of Lorenzo, and also obviously those who work behind, my colleagues, Pauline, Tatiana, the GCSP team, which is composed of only women, it's 100%, so Hajer and Jane and Anne-Caroline, and also Julie, also the interpreters, the very brilliant Julian and Malika, who bear with us and bear with the extension of time. Thank you for this. All the colleagues, we are improving Zoom, hybrid, presential. We continue the dialogue Friday afternoon, obviously, time for a break. Thank you so much to all of you, and happy to see you, all of you, very soon again. Thank you so much, and goodbye.